Welcome back to the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni. In episode 17, we heard the story of Buddha's journey to spread the Dharma. After 49 days of meditation and contemplation, the Buddha decided to share the Dhamma with the world, although he initially had concerns about the difficulty of the teachings for most people. The appearance and request of Brahma Sahampati reinforced his decision. The Buddha decided to seek out his 5 former companions at the deer park, Isipatana. When he met them again, he was met with skepticism and disbelief. The ascetics initially refused to accept that the Buddha had attained enlightenment, claiming that he had abandoned the ascetic path. With patience and compassion, the Buddha explained that he had discovered the middle way, which is neither too ascetic nor too indulgent. He emphasized that the Dharma he discovered was not based on reasoning, but was the result of intuition and spiritual experience. After much explanation, Kondanya, a man of profound wisdom, finally realized the Buddha's change. He knelt down, admitted his ignorance, and begged the Buddha to forgive him and teach him the Dharma. The other ascetics quickly followed suit, showing deep respect for the Buddha. Episode 18, the Dharma Cakravartin Sutra, the opening of the Dharma wheel. To allow the 5 monks to change their posture and sit comfortably, the Buddha spoke in a perfect Sanskrit voice with 8 perfect tones and began the first Dharma talk. Dear friends, there are 2 extremes, anta, that one who seeks the supreme renunciation, pabajitana, must avoid and should not practice. What are these 2 extremes? One is indulging in worldly pleasures, living a life of indulgence, attachment, and infatuation with the 5 sense objects, kamasika linuyoga. It is low, base, anarya, coarse, and worldly. It is not worthy of the virtues of a noble person. The other is persistently and strenuously practicing asceticism, adhikila yoga. It is a useless, fruitless practice that only brings suffering, only brings death, but does not bring liberation, the end of suffering. O monks, the Tathagata has avoided these 2 extremes of indulgence and self-mortification. For indulgence makes the body dull and the mind dull. It is the drag, the obstacle to spiritual progress and elevation, while self-mortification wears away life itself, causing both the spirit and intelligence to decline. Abandoning these 2 wrong extremes, the Tathagata has discovered the middle path, Majjhima Padapada. This is the path worthy of the noble ones. It gives rise to the eye of wisdom, Kakukarani, gives rise to wisdom, Jnanakarani, leads to the calm of defilements, Upasamaya, leads to superior knowledge, Abhinyaya, leads to Nibbana. Dear friends, there is a path that does not follow the incitement of physical desires, indulgence, does not follow the elimination of the normal, natural, essential needs of the body, asceticism. That is the middle way. Also known as the Noble Eightfold Path, the path has 8 branches: right view, samadhithi; right thought, samasankappa; right speech, samava; right action, samakamanta; right livelihood, samaajiva; right effort, samavayama; right mindfulness, samasati; right concentration, samasamadhi. This middle path will reveal to us the 4 eternal truths of life, the 4 noble truths, the 4 noble truths leading to the 4 noble paths, the 4 noble fruits, realizing the ultimate final goal of the ascetic life, which is liberation, nibbana. The Buddha had just introduced the topic with a warm and wonderful voice, with clear and precise words, sounds, and sentences, with completely new ideas and nouns. All 5 monks, who had sharp and intelligent faculties, knew clearly that this was the language of an enlightened person, of someone who had discovered the truth. They had never existed in any philosophical or religious system of thought, past or present. Seeing that all 5 monks were attentive and focused on the Dharma, the Buddha went into the main content. Dear friends, what are the 4 noble truths? The 4 noble truths, the 4 wonderful truths that we need to thoroughly understand. Thorough understanding means seeing clearly, understanding, and perceiving the ultimate truth, the sublime truth, Arya Saka, which if practiced seriously and correctly will achieve the goal of transcending the world and leaving behind impurities, which is extremely worthy of the noble qualities of good men in this world. Dear friends, the first is the noble truth of suffering, Dukkha Arya Saka, the noble truth of suffering. In general, there are 8 kinds of suffering that cover the entire world, controlling the entire life of sentient beings. They are suffering of birth, suffering of old age, suffering of sickness, suffering of death, suffering of dissatisfaction, suffering of living with people we hate or dislike, suffering of being separated from people we love, and finally suffering due to ego clinging, attachment, and infatuation with this body and mind of the five aggregates. Dear friends, the second is the noble truth of the cause, the origin of suffering, dukkha samudaya arya sakha, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. The Tathagata has discovered that the origin of all these various sufferings is craving, ta. Craving is the instigator, the active agent, the leading agent, the controlling agent, the binding agent, the operating agent. Craving is the cause that leads to rebirth, ponobhavika. Craving is combined with the mind of craving, longing, clinging, delighting, and indulging in pleasures in objects of possession or satisfaction of vain and frivolous purposes in life. More broadly, when craving clings to and is infatuated with material pleasures in the six sense objects, it is called craving, kamatana. When love feels that the pleasures of the six sense objects are not enough, wanting them to last forever, coupled with eternalism or attachment to the meditation of form, the realm of form, it is called love of existence, bhavata. When love satisfies the six sense objects with the mentality of wanting to enjoy them quickly, enjoying them in a hurry, fearing that they will end when they die, coupled with annihilationism or attachment to the meditation of formlessness, the realm of formlessness, it is called love of non-existence, vibhavata. The third, monks, is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha arya sakha. It is the place where craving is stilled, where all the causes of suffering are destroyed, where all suffering is cut off, where all craving, attachment, and clinging arise, sinking, binding, sinking, and sinking without a trace, where the house of the five aggregates has been dismantled, where self-love, self-view, self-grasping, and self-grasping no longer have a solid self to rely on, where there is nothing left to cling to, and that is liberation, nibbana, the ultimate goal of the ascetic life. Dear friends, the practice that leads to liberation, that leads to the realization of nibbana, this noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha gamini patipada arya sakha, the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, is the noble path with 8 factors: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. That noble 8-fold path is the wonderful truth that the saints have realized, also called the noble truth of the path. Today the Tathagata will expound it to you. O monks, the eye of wisdom, panyakaku, clearly sees the noble truth of suffering that has arisen in the Tathagata. Wisdom, jnana, clearly sees the true nature of the noble truth of suffering that has arisen in the Tathagata. Insight, panya, clearly sees all the suffering that has arisen in the Tathagata. Insight, vijja, clearly sees and penetrates the entire noble truth of suffering that has arisen in the Tathagata. The light of wisdom, aloka, dispels the darkness of ignorance that obscures the noble truth of suffering that has arisen in the Tathagata. All the dharmas belonging to the noble truth of suffering, before he became a Buddha, the Tathagata had never known or heard. Now they have arisen in the Tathagata. Therefore, the Tathagata declares as it really is, all dharmas in the 3 worlds, that which is composed, combined, conditioned, whether material or mental, except craving, they are all the noble truth of suffering. And that noble truth of suffering must be understood, must be realized, must be thoroughly comprehended. Dear friends, the eye of wisdom clearly sees that love is the cause of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. Wisdom clearly sees the true nature of the 3 kinds of love that have arisen in the Tathagata. Insight clearly sees the 108 kinds of love that have arisen in the Tathagata. Wisdom clearly penetrates all the causes of suffering that have arisen in the Tathagata. The light of wisdom dispels the darkness of the veil of ignorance that obscures the noble truth of the origin of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. All the kinds of love belonging to the noble truth of the origin of suffering, which the Tathagata had never known or heard before he became a Buddha, now they have arisen in the Tathagata. Thanks to this, the Tathagata, as it really is, declares that All kinds of love in the three worlds are the cause of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And that noble truth of the origin of suffering must be contemplated, must be seen clearly, must be realized, must be clearly perceived. O monks, the eye of wisdom clearly sees nirvana as the place where all suffering is extinguished, the holy truth of the cessation of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. The wisdom clearly sees nirvana as the place of peace and happiness beyond relativity, duality, and duality. The wisdom clearly sees nirvana with remainder, nirvana without remainder, which has arisen in the Tathagata. The wisdom clearly penetrates nirvana as the place where the holy truth of the cessation of suffering has arisen in the Tathagata. The light of wisdom dispels the darkness of the veil of ignorance that obscures the holy truth of the cessation of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. All the virtues, characteristics, and true natures of that nirvana, before he became a Buddha, the Tathagata had never known, never heard. Now they have arisen in the Tathagata. Therefore, the Tathagata truly and truly declares that the holy truth of the cessation of suffering is nirvana, is absolute happiness, is reality as it really is, beyond time. And that holy truth of the cessation of suffering must be intuitively understood, experienced, and attained without going through language, concepts, and reasoning. Dear friends, the eye of wisdom clearly sees the Noble Eightfold Path as the practice, the cultivation leading to the realization of nirvana, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. The wisdom that clearly sees the true nature of the Noble Eightfold Path has arisen in the Tathagata. The insight that clearly sees each Dharma branch in the Noble Eightfold Path in detail and coherently has arisen in the Tathagata. The wisdom that clearly and distinctly penetrates the Noble Eightfold Path has arisen in the Tathagata. The light of wisdom that dispels the darkness of the veil of ignorance that obscures the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, which has arisen in the Tathagata. All 8 parts, 8 branches of the path leading to the realization of nirvana are the middle way, the Noble Eightfold Path, which the Tathagata had never known or heard before he became a Buddha. Now they have arisen in the Tathagata. Therefore, the Tathagata, as it really is, declares that the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, the middle way with 8 branches, is the path leading to the end of rebirth, samsara, and the cessation of all suffering in the 3 realms and 6 paths. And the noble truth of the cessation of suffering and the path is not for adorning knowledge, not for accumulating understanding, not for preaching and preaching. It must be understood in order to cultivate, to practice diligently, to work hard, to be mindful, to be aware in every posture, in every breath. Dear friends, the Tathagata has seen all of them clearly, has penetrated all of them, has cultivated, has practiced to thoroughly understand all dharmas that need to be thoroughly understood, has attained all dharmas that need to be attained. The Tathagata truly knows that when the wisdom that sees clearly knows the true nature of dharmas in a completely clear, pure, and undefiled way according to the 3 levels, the 3 levels of wisdom wheels. That is, the wisdom of study, the wisdom of practice, and the wisdom of accomplishment in the 4 noble truths, forming 12 types of wisdom, forming a comprehensive and correct understanding, has not yet arisen in the Tathagata. Then until that time, the Tathagata does not dare to confirm, does not dare to declare that the Tathagata has attained Anuttaro Sammasambuddho before the ranks of monks, Brahmins, humans, Devas, Maras, and Brahmas in this world. Seeing all 5 monks paying close attention to the Dharma, listening to each word as if afraid of losing drops of pure nectar, the Buddha knew this, so he concluded the Dharma talk with a deep, powerful voice, with energy and force flowing abundantly like the sound of the ocean crashing between rocks. Dear friends, but now, the eye of wisdom, the wisdom of insight, the wisdom of insight, the light of wisdom that sees clearly, knows the true nature of all dharmas in a completely clear, pure, and uncontaminated way by absolute knowledge, as it really is according to the 3 levels of wisdom in the 4 noble truths, forming 12 types of wisdom, has arisen in the Tathagata. The Tathagata boldly confirms and declares that The Tathagata has attained the supreme perfect enlightenment before the ranks of monks, Brahmins, humans, devas, demon kings, and Brahmas in this world. And thus, due to the wisdom of contemplation, insight, clear seeing, and clear knowing, the holy path of Arhat has arisen in the Tathagata. The Tathagata's mind has been completely liberated from all afflictions in a steadfast, unmovable way. Nothing can shake it, nothing can destroy it. And this is the last life, the final life of the Tathagata. There will be no more rebirth in samsara. After the Buddha finished preaching this Dharmakakapavatana, turning the wheel of truth, sermon, the 5 ascetics were extremely delighted with a kind of teaching they had never heard before. The ascetic Kondanya alone attained the Dharma I, Dhammakaku, that was free from defilements. That is, he had cut off a number of defilements and afflictions and was established in the fruit of Sotapanna. He saw the truth as it really is. Any practice that arises, that practice ceases. Yamkinchi samudaya dhammam sabatam nirodha dhamma. The devas on earth heard the supreme Dharma and praised it with one voice. Today, in the deer park at Isapatana near the city of Varanasi, the world-honored one beat the drum to preach an extremely wonderful Dharma. Never before had a monk, Brahmin, angel, demon king, Brahma, or anyone in this world been able to preach it. Hearing this, the devas of the 4 great heavenly kings, Trayastrimsha, Dharani, and Nirmanakaya also praised it, praising it without end. The Brahma Devas in the realms of the form world all praised it with one heart. At that moment, at that very instant, the words of praise and admiration penetrated the ultimate realm of the form world. 10,000 worlds all shook and trembled. The radiance of the perfectly enlightened one was more victorious and more powerful than the radiance of all the devas and Brahmas combined, spreading boundlessly, shining and illuminating the entire world and the universe. The ascetic Kondanya understood, saw clearly, and knew the fundamentals of the 4 noble truths, eliminated all doubts, and only believed in the Buddha and the Dharma, and no longer believed in anything else. Extremely grateful and deeply moved, the ascetic Kondanya knelt down 5 times and said, "May the world-honored one allow me to receive the bhikkhu precepts and give me refuge." Buddha smiled the Dharma smile. "Come here, bhikkhu." The Tathagata confirms that you have become a bhikkhu. The Dhamma that the Tathagata has well expounded, you should strive to uphold, diligently practice, live a pure life to end suffering, to end the cycle of birth and death. Ehi bhikkhu. Svaka dhammo kara brahmacharyam sama dukkasa antaki riyaya. So the ascetic Kondanya from then on was called Anyasi Kondanya, Anak Kyuchanyu. Kyuchanyu has realized, the first bhikkhu in the Sangha of the Venerable Master. That day was exactly on the evening of the full moon of June, the year of the rooster, 2 months after the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. That night, the moon was bright and the air was cool. The Buddha sat on a rock in the middle of the deer park, in the state of cessation of perception and feeling, to rest after many days of hard walking and the whole afternoon of exhausting his breath and energy preaching the Dharma to the 5 ascetics. Late at night, the Buddha returned to his near samadhi, initiated his thinking and reflection, and thought as follows. Beings with little dust can understand this Dharma. Mr. Kondanya has seen the Dharma. The flow of mind will slowly, smoothly enter the path because he is a wise person, only needing the general outline, generalization he can grasp. But the others need to be explained many times with many specific examples so that they can find the profound meaning, understand the Dharma, and see the Dharma. The day before yesterday, after Kondanya, Mahanama and Asaji had gone on alms round to provide food for the people, the Buddha gave a detailed exposition of the Dhamma to Vapa and Bhaddiya. At the end of the exposition, both ascetics attained the Dhamma I, became stream enterers, and were confirmed by the Buddha as bhikkhus. The next day, when Kondanya, Vapa, and Bhaddiya went on alms round, the Buddha again gave a detailed exposition to Mahanama and Asaji. In the afternoon, both ascetics attained stream enterership, and the Buddha further confirmed the ordination of 2 more bhikkhus. So on the 20th day of the month of Ashaha, all 5 bhikkhus were dressed in neat robes, their hair and beards clean, because they had abandoned ascetic practices and all forms of asceticism. They all had unshakable faith and were gradually taking steady steps on the path to immortality. From the 20th day until the end of the month, the weather began to change to rain. Because it was now the Vasana season, they were busy making leaf huts for themselves, and especially making a relatively good, neat, and cozy leaf hut for the Buddha. When the sky was clear and cloudless, in front of the first 5 bhikkhus, who were the indestructible seeds to sow the Dharma throughout Jambudvipa, the Buddha used his wisdom to analyze, widely and meticulously develop some Dharma thoughts that seemed too new to them. He took the trouble to go back and forth from the truth of suffering, although it was simple, only the 8 sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, not getting what one wants, separation from what one loves, meeting with what one hates, and clinging to the 5 aggregates, but not everyone could easily understand it. The truth about suffering is not only understood through nouns and semantics, but also needs to be seen clearly and specifically in one's own body and mind, one's life in the relationship of contact and experience. Birth, the suffering of birth, jati dukkha, first refers to the suffering in the womb, the suffering from the moment of conception, the suffering of having to endure darkness and filth, suffering from pungent, hot, cold, slimy, foul, from movements, from the erratic changes of the mother's psychology. The suffering of birth, just the thought of rebirth, searching for a realm, finding a way to be reborn into something familiar, into something that one loves, likes, and is infatuated with, is already suffering. It is from this thought of birth that it leads living beings to wander throughout the 3 realms and 6 paths, then endure countless hardships, adversities, blood, tears, disasters, and suffering. Please, world-honored one, out of compassion, Kondanya said, would you expound extensively and in detail on suffering so that we, your disciples, may understand thoroughly all its ins and outs? Bhikkhus, listen, the Tathagata will explain according to that request. Birth, here, is limited to the moment when the material substances are born from the moment of birth, linking consciousness, name, combining with the father's sperm and mother's blood, form. It is the seed in any sentient realm. The first living entity in the womb is not as beautiful as in a blue lotus, a red lotus, a white lotus, but must be understood as a maggot born in a rotten fish carcass, in a pile of rotten excrement. That entity is located below the place where food is stored, stomach, above the place where waste is excreted, anus, stuck between the abdomen and the spine, very cramped, dark, dirty, must endure foul winds and all kinds of disgusting smells. For 9 months and 10 days, that living entity must undergo immeasurable suffering, being burned by the heat like fire from the fire in the mother's womb, unable to stretch or move. In addition, when the mother moves back and forth, lies down, sits down, walks, or stands, especially when she stumbles or falls, it suffers extreme pain as if being pulled, tossed back and forth like a snake in the hands of a snake charmer. When the mother drinks cold water, it feels numb as if in an icy hell. When the mother eats or drinks hot food, it feels like being submerged in a shower of burning coals. When the mother eats or drinks salty or sour food, it feels like being submerged in salt and vinegar water. These are the extreme sufferings of being in the womb that all fetuses must endure. Bhikkhus. Such is the suffering in the womb. When it comes out of the womb, it has to endure the suffering of being upside down by the force of the wind of karma. Being pushed out of the dark and narrow cave, it is truly terrifying, like having to crawl through a small hole and then being crushed between 2 rocks, extremely painful. Then, the baby has just come out of the mother's womb. Its body is fragile and sensitive, so when it is held, bathed, and cleaned, it feels pain like being stabbed by a needle, cut by a knife. A monk suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, this truth is truly terrifying." The Buddha concluded, "Yes, suffering is like that, monks. From that suffering comes the whole process of what is called life. Then the countless sufferings in life also come from that suffering. It is the root of all sufferings. So when the Tathagata preaches the noble truth of suffering, the Tathagata puts suffering first as the decisive condition for the arising of sufferings." Then what about old age, jara dukkha? The Blessed One continued, "Old age refers to the skin that is wrinkled and shriveled like a dried bitter gourd. The once green hair is now like ashes or silver. The once bright blue eyes of youth are now just pits of pus, dull and white, unable to see anything. Then there are the teeth that are like ashes, painful, rotten, and gradually fall out. The ears begin to become deaf and dull. The back is now bent like a millstone. The limbs tremble, the bones ache, the inability to eat or sleep, confusion, forgetfulness. In other words, old age is a characteristic of conditioned things. It refers to the faculties being weakened, damaged, strength waning, youth disappearing, memory going bankrupt, intelligence declining. In general, it is the entire decay, destruction, old age of each molecule, atom, cell, impermanence, aging, deterioration of every substance, every blood, every energy, every vitality of sentient beings. When the body ages, the mind ages too. Sometimes not only does the body suffer, but it also causes suffering in the mind, such as sorrow, lamentation, anxiety, and despair. As for the suffering of illness, bayadi dukkha, there are hundreds of kinds of illness, thousands of kinds of illness when carrying a conditioned body. They come from grains, fruits, vegetables, animals in the garden, in the forest, in the sky, in rivers, seas, ponds, and lakes. They come from water, from the air. They are born together, arise together with the residents, communities in developing towns. They are also caused by eating a lot, sleeping a lot, working a lot, thinking a lot. They are also caused by the erratic weather of sun, rain, hot and cold. And finally, just the disturbance of the vital energy and blood, the disharmony of the four elements, is enough to make us see clearly the suffering of illness of the body. Of the four elements, just one great prosperity or one great decline is enough to cause illness. Illness comes from the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. In the body, there are diseases of the skin, teeth, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, small intestine, large intestine, stomach. There are also diseases of the brain, of bile, of phlegm, of urine, of blood, of fat, of joints, of spinal cord. Some diseases can be cured, some cannot be cured. And it seems that every 10 years, every 100 years, humans have to face new diseases. They grow according to the flourishing material life of humans. In short, to have a body is to be governed by the laws of the universe. It is to be influenced by day and night, sun and rain, heat and cold, the sun, the moon, the forces, the energies, the karmic interactions in all things. To have a body is to have diseases, and all diseases are uncomfortable, painful, and miserable. As for death, the same is true of the suffering of death, marana dukkha. Hundreds of deaths, thousands of ways of dying will wait to take away the lives of living beings. Death from hunger, death from overfullness, death from water, from fire, from flood, from storm, from accident, from illness, from weapons, from poison. Death from anemia, from excess blood, from bile, from phlegm, from air, from the heart, from the liver, from the kidneys. In short, death from the end of life, death from karma, death from hundreds of types of karma, death from the end of blessings, or from hundreds of other reasons. They come from outside or from within the body, and morning, noon, evening, day and night, the shadow of the god of death is always wandering around with a scythe in hand. In other words, death is the natural characteristic of conditioned things. It cuts off the life force. It manifests absence in the realms of existence. It causes all life to fall away. It rots and decays. All that suffering and death is indeed terrifying, but it is only a gross suffering, a physical suffering. Sentient beings from the stage of birth to death are also governed by mental sufferings, such as sorrow, lamentation, anxiety, and distress. Then the Buddha took the trouble to speak in detail about sorrow, about the suffering of sorrow, sukha dukkha, the characteristics of sorrow, the effects of sorrow on the whole body and mind. Sorrow is manifested outwardly as sadness, as gloom, as melancholy, as the withered, pale complexion of the face, but inwardly it is the fatigue and weariness of the mental factors. It is also a slow, constant burning. Although it does not burst into flames, it makes the heart wither, the liver and intestines as if being cooked in a pan with a simmering fire underneath. Sorrow, suffering, parideva dukkha, is expressed externally as crying, groaning, complaining. It is a level of suffering higher than sorrow. The fire burning inside is also stronger, so it makes the heart and liver dry, the lips dry, the throat sore, the tongue bitter. Sorrow, pain, and sorrow, domanassa dukkha, is the suffering that has penetrated deeply and permeated the soul. It is the oppression and suffering that is one level higher than sorrow. It makes sadness and worry feel like pain, throbbing deep in the heart. Whoever is seized by the claws of sorrow because of the fire burning inside, that person cries, pulls his hair and ears, beats his chest, rolls around and struggles, is in so much pain that he cannot control himself anymore. Upasadukkha, this is suffering that has reached its peak, that has reached the point of complete disappointment and despair. Although it is no longer manifested outwardly like sorrow and lamentation, it is similar to the heart, liver, and intestines that have shriveled and dried up after cooking. If sorrow, lamentation, grief, and despair go together, combine with each other, or arise together, it can easily lead to taking poison, hanging, cutting one's blood vessels, or committing suicide with a knife. The above-mentioned sadness and grief are sometimes combined with the suffering of not getting what one wants, yampi chan na labati tampi dukam, which means wanting, wishing, icham, wishing for something that cannot be achieved, does not come true, na labati, thus giving rise to suffering. The more one lives, the more one grows up, the more one experiences until one is close to the grave. One realizes that life is something that is always contrary to one's will, not as one wishes, not as one wishes. There is no need for satisfaction through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body that can make one satisfied, content. They always feel lacking, not satisfied, thus urging them to seek more satisfaction. The more one drinks from the five senses, the more one thirsts, and then the more one seeks satisfaction, the more one faces nothingness, is swallowed by nothingness, or is burned by nothingness. Even the goals, dreams, ideals that arise from love, career, money, fame, status, they are just empty, incomplete. Even when they exist, when they are achieved, when they are grasped, they are not like that. They are something else. They are still in front of us, still out of reach. This is the truth, the reality. So the suffering of dissatisfaction governs all of humanity, gods and Brahmas, without leaving anyone out. The suffering of separation from loved ones, piyehi vipayogo dukkho, that is, the people and things that we love and are pleased with, must be separated from vipayoga, giving rise to this kind of suffering. So much love, affection, attachment is blocked, cut off, hindered, causing us to be hurt, sad, and miserable. It also means being separated, cut off from something that is lovable, worth loving. It makes us lose contact with the world and the familiar, loving environment. It is also the loss of father, mother, wife, husband, children, grandchildren, teachers, friends, property, and career. Suffering from resentment, api sampayoga dukkho, that is, having to be close to, in contact with, and intimate with someone you hate, apiya, often gives rise to this suffering. So much frustration, annoyance, and resentment can lead to hatred that keeps smoldering in the heart. In short, the five aggregates of suffering, pankupadanakanda dukkha, are when there is this physical body, there are feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, and especially when clinging to it, grasping at it, loving it, taking it as me, as mine, then immeasurable suffering will arise again and again, and cannot be destroyed. All of that is the truth about suffering, the noble truth of suffering, which governs all sentient beings. Like a super physician, after examining the symptoms, in order to effectively diagnose and treat the disease, he must find the cause, the origin, the source of the disease. Likewise, the Buddha thoroughly presented the origin of the noble truth of suffering, which is craving. Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, craving is the noble truth of suffering. Craving exists everywhere, at all times, in all areas, in all activities. It exists from the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. It exists from form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. It exists from the past, present, and future. It exists from the realm of desire, the realm of form, and the formless realm. It has the gross, the subtle, the clear, the impure, the near, the far, the visible, the invisible. Wherever, at all times, in all areas, in all activities, there arises satisfaction, liking, fondness, love, delight, and then leads to infatuation, the desire to be satisfied, to be happy, to have attained. There is craving. There is also a craving that few people see, which is the desire to be forever young, forever healthy. For all one's material and spiritual possessions to be permanent, steadfast, and indestructible, and for one's soul to be eternal. Sometimes, feeling that worldly happiness is too fleeting and ephemeral, They want to practice to live an eternal life in the heavens where material desires are exaggerated to the utmost. There are opposite cases where they are afraid that when they die, it will be over, so they seek ways to enjoy it quickly, to enjoy it in a hurry, to find every way to satisfy themselves to the fullest, regardless of reason, morality, human love, and love for all living beings. Oh, love fills the three realms, four species. Love is the root, is symbiotic with greed, anger, and delusion. When love is obtained, then there is greed. When love is not obtained, then there is anger, and from there arises a whole forest of chaotic psychology, thorny and bushy with jealousy, dissatisfaction, betrayal, ingratitude, boredom, arrogance, bloodshed, war, and hatred that covers the universe and the lives of all sentient beings. And then, monks, the cessation of craving is nibbana. Nibbana is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. The cessation of craving is the quenching of greed and hatred. The cessation of craving is the cessation of the five aggregates. The cessation of craving is the house of ego that has been painstakingly built for countless lifetimes being destroyed. All the pillars, rafters, beams, walls, roofs are burned away by liberating wisdom, leaving no residue. Then transcendental joy appears. Countless illnesses and sufferings are no more. Birth and death in the three realms and six paths are no more. However, nibbana is not within reason, thinking, reasoning, language, or concepts. It must be realized. It must be seen immediately, seen directly by the unconditioned, uncontaminated wisdom. This is the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality that is no longer governed by the limited conditioned world, no longer determined by time and conventional categories. It transcends the three realms. Let's call it profound, absolute, inconceivable bliss. By the time the Dharma talk reached this point, it was already late at night, and the 5 new bhikkhus asked the Buddha to rest. The Dharma talk had been analyzed in detail by the world-honored one, but many questions still lingered in the minds of the new bhikkhus, especially about nirvana. That night, it seemed that all 5 of them did not sleep, but kept talking quietly. And these were the lingering questions. Nirvana cannot be thought of or explained, so is it non-existent like turtle hair or rabbit horn? Nirvana is absent of the 5 aggregates, so what is left of it? Nothingness. Is the characteristic of nirvana destruction? It destroys defilements, destroys greed, anger, and delusion, destroys the realms of existence because there is no more rebirth. Nirvana is not conditioned, so it is uncreated. Nirvana is not created, has no aging or death, so is it eternal? Kondanya whispered to his friends, "Those are good questions, but the Buddha's sermon has not yet ended, so let's not bother him. Let's wait patiently." In the following days, sometimes outdoors, sometimes in a hermitage, the Buddha continued to widely expound the Four Noble Truths. Nirvana, as presented, certainly has some unclear points. Not being clear, there are doubts and suspicions, which are natural. The destination is like that. The goal of the monk's life is like that. But there is also the path to get there, the path of practice. That is the path leading to nirvana. Then the Buddha presented the spiritual map, the middle path as summarized, which is the noble truth. Once again, the Buddha detailed the meaning of each term. The Noble Eightfold Path begins with right view, the true view, the view that is complete, round, transparent, true, and real, the view of the Four Noble Truths. In other words, right view is a view that has not been distorted, erroneous, or refracted by reason, thinking, psychological states, or subjective emotions, a view that is true to its true nature. That right view is a transcendental, unconditioned, and unsupported view reserved for the unlearned. There is also another type of right view. That is to clearly see good, evil, suffering, blessings, cause and effect, this life, the next life, the cycle of birth and death. It belongs to the world with outflows, and the support is reserved for the learned. Both types of right view above eliminate wrong views, eternalism, and annihilationism. Eliminate the views of the fetters, the views of the forest, the views of the wilderness, the views of the madness of all 62 wrong views in the world. When you have that right view, then you have right thinking, which means right thinking, true thinking. This is because right seeing leads to right thinking, not because there is a right thing to think. And if there is a right thing to practice, then that right thing also becomes something to be grasped at, becomes the shadow of love, of ego, of views. Right thinking must be understood as belonging to the category of morality and ethics. If you want to know what that right thing is, you just need to stay away from sensual thoughts, angry thoughts, and harmful thoughts. Staying away from sensual thoughts means not thinking about form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, but aiming to reject, avoid, and escape from them. Nekama sankappa. Thanks to that, ego, greed, and craving have no chance to sprout. The same meaning is given to abstaining from anger, jealousy, and anger. When the attributes of anger are softened and cooled, we will have a state of mind free from anger. Avyapada sankappa, non-anger thinking, which is very close to loving kindness. The third thought, abstaining from harmful thoughts, means not thinking of maliciously harming others or harboring violent thoughts. In other words, at that time we will have harmless thoughts, avhimsa sankappa, which will support the above non-anger to have a clear, bright mind, a pure, cool heart. From that mind, that intelligence, any thought will be good, wholesome, beautiful, cool, noble, and superior. Right thinking leads to right speech, true speech, speech that is true, true. Right speech also has connotations. Speech must be based on truth, reality, truth. Speech must be wholesome, good, beneficial, good. Speech must be easy to hear, easy to please the ear, beautiful. If one of these three elements is missing, right speech is considered incomplete. With the good, perfect content of right speech, then every word will bring benefits to oneself and to others. Speaking complete words like this will invisibly eliminate lying, speaking untruths, slandering, speaking cruel, fierce, slanderous, insulting, and insulting words. Also avoid speaking with two tongues, backbiting, embellishing, speaking smoothly like grease, speaking sweetly like sugar, or adding fish sauce, salt, and spices to make it pleasant to the ear. Must avoid speaking harshly, rudely, speaking words that stab at the back of the neck and jabbing at the back of the neck. Must avoid speaking vulgar, tasteless, frivolous, and empty words that bore the wise. In short, it is forbidden to lie, speak harshly, speak slanderously, and be frivolous. Right speech leads to right action, that is, right action, right body. Right body or good body action means the body does not do wrong, unrighteous, evil things, things that the world condemns. That is, it is forbidden to kill, steal, and commit adultery. First, it is not to kill or harm people or animals, to respect the lives of sentient beings. Even inanimate things like trees and grass should not be cut down or burned indiscriminately. Second, it is not to steal, dig holes in walls, or break open cupboards to take property, wealth, valuables, or worthless things belonging to others. Third, it is forbidden to commit adultery, sexual misconduct, enticement, or seduction to have sex with other people's wives and children. Only monks and nuns must live a life of pure celibacy. Furthermore, right action leads to right livelihood, to make a living rightly, that is, to stay away from making a living wrongly by body and speech. Having a body means having to nurture it, feed it, clothe it, give it medicine when it is sick, give it a place to sleep, avoid the sun, rain, heat, cold, snakes, mosquitoes. The life of the ethnic groups in primitive tribes with few needs, the material means of living are quite simple. When hamlets and villages were established, the demands for conveniences and comforts kept increasing, and life with the needs for food, clothing, housing, and medicine became more and more complicated and confusing. Because of their pursuit and hunting for material things and wealth, people began to get involved in evil. The more the needs, the more evil increased. The more evil increased, the more bad habits, vices, greed, selfishness, deception, cunning, anger, violence freely took root and sprouted. In developed cities and towns, the problem of making a living became diverse, rich, and multidimensional. The more material needs, means of living, and living were required to be met, the more dishonest professions sprang up like mushrooms. Therefore, the wise and virtuous people of the past and present, facing the current state of society and people mired in material desires, have known how to restrain themselves and encourage themselves to stay away from occupations considered evil as follows: the occupation of killing and harming living beings, the occupation of trading in weapons, the occupation of cutting boards and knives, the occupation of buying and selling animals, the occupation of selling and buying poisons, the occupation of distilling, selling and buying fermented wine, distilled wine. The more you nourish the body, pamper the body, and love the body, the greater the evil karma. It is difficult for a good man living in the world to keep his hands clean. More or less, he will be covered in mud and dust. As for the renunciants, due to their simple needs, they only have a beak, alms bowl, a pair of wings, 3 robes. But they leisurely travel the vast seas and long rivers. They eat just enough, wear just enough, sleep anywhere, and for medicine, they have urine, cow dung, and roots here and there. The simpler the 4 necessities are, the more leisurely and carefree the life of a monk. The true livelihood of a monk is to eat food that people give him or offer him, to wear clothes made from cloth that people collect or throw away in cemeteries, in the middle of forests, at market corners, or by the roadside. Medicine or a place to sleep is similar. If one takes, uses, possesses, or speaks about or suggests anything that people have not given or given him or her with sincerity, then that is wrong livelihood. When we have knowledge and thinking like a lamp that lights up the mind and intellect, then speech, karma, and life are the stages of perfecting the body, speech, and personal virtue. When we are upright, serious, and exemplary, we still need to strive and actively nurture a good mind, stay away from evil thoughts, and that is right diligence, true effort. In our mind, there are evil and good seeds. Don't let the evil seeds sprout. If they sprout, we must be determined to cut them off and dig them up. If the good seeds sprout, we must be attentive, skillful, and try to make them sprout. If they sprout, we must cherish them, take care of them, and actively add fertilizer and water so that they can quickly grow and become green, shady trees. In other words, right diligence is a determined effort to eliminate bad, evil mental states, and to nurture and develop good, wholesome mental states. It's that simple, but it's extremely complicated and difficult. So before it, there are views, thoughts, speech karma, and support networks, adding strength and creating a favorable environment. And perhaps that's not enough. So after right effort comes right mindfulness, true attention, paying attention to the 4 places where internal and external dharmas often arise: mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of dharmas, that is, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Afflictions and suffering are also there, but peace and nirvana are also there. The practice of purifying all dust and all pollution of body and mind, clearly seeing the true nature of dharmas, must start from here, right mindfulness, that is, paying attention to, recording all movements and stillness, all impacts coming from the physical body, feelings, mental states, along with the objects of names and forms. Right mindfulness helps us not to be negligent, not to forget, not to be forgetful, making the mind established and steadfast to support right concentration. The Buddha preached up to this point while taking a break. The monk Bhaddiya asked, "Dear world-honored one, mindfulness of the body is simply mindfulness of this physical body, from the in and out breath, the postures of walking, standing, lying, sitting, and the 32 parts of the body. Or is there something else?" Yes, Bhaddiya, but there is more. The Buddha said, including the 4 great elements, including the visualization of the forms of corpses gradually disintegrating in the cemetery. Bhikkhu Assaji asked, "Please, world-honored one, explain more clearly about mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of dharma, so that we, the disciples, can easily understand." Mindfulness of feelings means that all feelings of suffering, happiness, equanimity, joy, and sadness must be recorded honestly and attentively. When a feeling arises, it will affect the entire psychophysiology. Whether that feeling is unpleasant, suffering, pleasant, pleasure, neutral, equanimity, joyful, joy, or upset, sorrow, it must be recorded as it really is. Don't reduce it, don't control it, and don't compromise. How it comes, how it stays, how it goes, must be in accordance with the law of birth and death. Don't be determined or determined by subjective psychology. You must contemplate it as it really is, as its true nature. Mindfulness of the mind means paying attention to recording all psychological states that occur in the mind: greed, anger, ignorance or non-greed, non-anger, non-ignorance, including the mind of the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm, including the mind that is liberated from afflictions, or the mind that is not liberated from afflictions. Mindfulness of the Dharma is more complicated, because the Dharma's inner meaning is very vast and broad. However, we only distinguish and limit the Dharmas that belong to the objects of the mind on the path of practice. When practicing, we will clearly see the dharmas that cover up and hinder, such as tiredness and fatigue of the mental factors, thina, sloth and torpor, the wildness and drowsiness of the body, middha, torpor, doubt and suspicion about wholesome dharmas and practices, vishikich, impatience, irritation, and discomfort, vyapada, anger, agitation, restlessness, udaka, or remorse, kukuka, and sensual desire, kamachanda. When practicing meditation, these 5 covering and hindering dharmas will be counteracted and made quiet by the appearance of the 5 jhana factors, namely, initial application, vitaka, sustained application, vikara, rapture, piti, happiness, sukha, and one-pointedness of mind, ekagata. These are the dharmas that should be noted. In addition, the 5 aggregates, the 12 links of dependent origination, the 7 factors of enlightenment are all dharmas that must be contemplated and recorded honestly. Venerable Sir, so is there concentration in mindfulness? Mahanam asked. Mindfulness supports concentration. Mindfulness leads to concentration. Within mindfulness there is concentration. And mindfulness, as it truly is, also leads to wisdom. The Buddha again kindly explained. However, the Tathagata reserved that for another occasion. Because there are still many hidden dharmas in the condensed lecture above, to understand it thoroughly, clearly, the Tathagata must understand it for many days, many months, many years, even hundreds of years. I am afraid that I still cannot explain it all. Hearing this, the 5 new monks looked at each other silently. They saw that the Buddha seemed to have a treasure trove. The more he preached, the more he saw, the more he expanded and deepened. The more he preached, the more new things they heard. And most importantly, their minds became more peaceful, their wisdom became clearer. It was truly a wonderful and miraculous dharma, truly an immortal and miraculous dharma. They listened as if they were drinking in every word, every sentence, sweet, pure, sublime, vast, and profound. Bhikkhus. And there is also right concentration. You have all practiced and attained concentration, whether low or high according to traditional religion. You already know it clearly. The highest concentration in the 3 worlds is the concentration of nothingness, and the concentration of neither perception nor non-perception, from the 2 teachers Alara Kalamagoda and Udaka Ramaputta, which the Tathagata has also attained. But why did the Tathagata abandon it? The Tathagata abandons it because it does not lead to wisdom, insight, enlightenment, liberation. Those concentrations are still in birth and death. Both teachers are still attached, do not want to let go, still cling, still possess, still let go and one-pointedness, still abide in the state of profound bliss of let go and one-pointedness. So the Tathagata says that is not right concentration. Still clinging to views and ego, still compromising with birth and death, is not right concentration. Before you, the first monks in this immortal dharma, the Tathagata declares, only the concentration of the world, only the concentration of those who have attained the 4 saints and the 4 fruits, with nirvana as their object, is true concentration, is correct concentration. All 5 monks were cold, shivering, and had goosebumps. It turned out that the concentration they had been residing in for so long was not right concentration, so was it wrong concentration? Such a reversal of knowledge had left them shocked and frightened. Suddenly, Kondanya asked a very pertinent question. Venerable world-honored one. Then there is another concentration, the concentration of liberation, that you have been abiding in every night. The Buddha smiled and replied, there is no such thing as liberating concentration, Konjanya. Seeing all 5 of them falling into confusion and bewilderment, the Buddha immediately untied the knot. When the liberated mind, when liberating wisdom resides in any concentration, that concentration is called liberating concentration. You all just established knowledge like that. All 5 of them breathed a sigh of relief. They were so impressed by the Dharma talk and so grateful for the Buddha's heartfelt explanation that they all knelt down to thank him, tears welling up in their eyes. The other night, the monk Kondanya, perhaps because of much thought due to the Dhamma talk, asked a question. While teaching the 4 noble truths, the Buddha emphasized the eye of wisdom, the wisdom of insight, the wisdom of insight. But the path leading to nirvana, the noble eightfold path, the noble eightfold path, the middle way to practice, there is no mention of right wisdom, no wisdom is mentioned, only mindfulness leads to concentration. The Buddha was pleased with the question. Kondanya, you are wise. You have asked a question that is like an index finger pointing straight to the essentials, the root. Yes, your question is exactly the issue that the Tathagata intends to expound today. Bhikkhus. After presenting about suffering, the Tathagata spoke about the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. That path, the Noble Eightfold Path, the Tathagata also explained in general and in detail, but without right wisdom. In the previous Dharma talks, the Tathagata mentioned right view as the first factor and then finally leads to right concentration. That order is correct, because if you see correctly, everything is correct. If you see incorrectly, everything is wrong. However, that is only a hypothetical method. If someone asks, how can one, upon hearing the Dharma, upon practicing, attain such sublime, unsurpassed, pure, and undefiled right view? The question is very good, very appropriate. To have that right view, one must have right concentration, true, liberating concentration. To have true liberating concentration, one must have right mindfulness, recording the dharmas as they truly are. To have that true mindfulness, one must have pure speech, pure karma, and pure livelihood. And to have true speech, karma, and life like that, one must have true knowledge and right thinking to guide. It turns out that it goes in circles. Circles are not accurate. It should be said to be related, interactive. Related, interactive are not accurate. They are co-born. If there is insightful wisdom to observe, then in the very moment of the path, the wisdom mind is perfect. There is right knowledge to illuminate, and wisdom mental factors, then all of those right things are present. But when using worldly language, there is a temporary assumption of order before and after. Bhikkhus. Because of the assumption, it is said that there are 8 branches, 8 factors of the path. Because when we talk about view and thinking, it is to practice wisdom. When we talk about speech, action, and livelihood, it is to practice body, speech, and precepts. When we talk about mindfulness and concentration, it is to practice mind and concentration. As for right effort, depending on the time and place, it supports view, thinking, supports speech, action, livelihood, supports mindfulness and concentration. Body, mind, and wisdom have established precepts, concentration, and wisdom, and all need the true effort of diligence. But body, mind, and wisdom are interactive and inseparable. Precepts, concentration, and wisdom are also like that. If there is one, there must be the other. They arise dependently. Calling the Noble Eightfold Path refers to the perfection and completeness in the mind of a saint. Calling the Noble Eightfold Path refers to the monks who are on the path, in each moment perfecting themselves, practicing precepts, practicing concentration, practicing wisdom. Bhikkhus. The Tathagata has said that mindfulness leads to concentration and mindfulness also leads to wisdom, because the 4 foundations of mindfulness both accomplish the concentration of the form realm and have the ability to lead to liberating wisdom. When the 4 foundations of mindfulness are complete, right mindfulness is complete, then concentration is needed, wisdom is needed, wisdom is needed. Then, right concentration leads to right view. Right view is right wisdom. And this right wisdom, depending on the time, place, function, level, and activity, is also called the factor of discerning the Dharma, the base of wisdom, the power of wisdom, and the mental factors of wisdom. Right thinking is the mental factor of meditation. When it is still in the world, it includes 3 types of renunciation: renunciation of desire, renunciation of anger, renunciation of harm, which will accomplish 3 separate minds: non-greed, loving-kindness, and compassion. But in the path of the transcendental world, they are only one because of the cessation of desire, anger, and harm. Right speech includes the 4 wholesome verbal actions, which is enough. Right action includes the 3 wholesome bodily actions, which is enough. Right livelihood is manifested as a life of few desires and contentment. Speech, action, and livelihood are also called the 3 mental restraints, which are virtues that are favored and praised by the wise. They are often reinforced by the root of faith and the power of faith. Right effort supports wherever needed, as mentioned. It includes the 4 right efforts: mental factors of energy, energy roots, energy forces, and the factors of enlightenment. Right mindfulness includes the 4 foundations of mindfulness: mental factors of mindfulness, mindfulness roots, mindfulness powers, and the factors of enlightenment of mindfulness. Right concentration includes concentration with application, concentration with reflection because it is also used for contemplation, mental factors of one-pointedness, concentration roots, concentration powers, and also includes joy, peace, concentration, and equanimity of the factors of enlightenment. And this, monks, if the Noble Eightfold Path and its factors are not clearly understood, not clearly seen, not properly practiced as the Tathagata has explained, one may fall into the 8 wrong paths. Wrong view, wrong thought, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration. Then they will lead to wrong wisdom and wrong liberation. At this point, the monks seem to speak in unison. The disciples are overwhelmed by this teaching. If we talk about the details and coherence, they are separate as individuals, but they are mixed together, dissolved into each other, making it difficult to distinguish clear boundaries. Lord Buddha, that is enough. That is more than enough for us disciples to have time to thoroughly understand. We disciples also need to contemplate and reflect on every movement, gesture, dignity, every breath, every arising of thought. This teaching, indeed, does not require seeking rationality and reasoning, but must be realized in order to verify and experience Lord Buddha. Fortunately, you have understood and seen a part of it. The Tathagata hopes that in just a few days, you will not only fully understand the path of renunciation, but also end all doubts about whether nirvana is non-existent, void, permanent, or uncreated. All 5 bhikkhus were startled, their hair standing on end. This was truly the inconceivable insight of the perfectly enlightened one. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to the video about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, adapted from the work A Life, a Sun and Moon by Master Geoy Duck. This video series will be broadcast at 7 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel Buddhist Story. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the next episodes, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your relatives and friends. All your comments are very valuable to us. Please leave comments below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and see you again in the next episodes of the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni.